feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks and coming at you Tuesday morning. It's January 7th after the Wolves 108-106 win over the Clippers on Monday night. A game the Wolves won after making a starting lineup change. 34 games into the season, Chris Finch opted to take Mike Conley out of the lineup and plug DiVincenzo in. And that change and what it kind of changes for this team, not just in the starting five, but kind of throughout the entire way they play in their whole rotation. That's going to drive a lot of our conversation today. And to have that conversation on a Tuesday, I'm joined by Britt Robson from Mimpost because Chris Hine is traveling to New Orleans and Orlando for the road trip this week. Chris is going to join me tomorrow, Wednesday afternoon, for us to record. But have Britt today. Britt, we're going to just jump right into this. Like I mentioned before we hit record, I'm just going to start by playing Finch's answer as to why he made the starting lineup change after on Saturday, him saying, I don't think a starting lineup change is the magic bullet. We'll start there and then just kind of roll on what the externalities of this change are. Here's Finch last night.
Changed from Saturday to now to make you want to make a move there?
You know, I just read all the papers, John, and everybody was telling me, and I said, you know what, shit, I should change the starting lineup. So, I mean, it was all about trying to get Mike into a group of guys that could accentuate his talents better. He, plays the bulk of his minutes with that unit. The usage has shifted in that unit, so it was really a way to try to help him get going.
I love when you can kind of tell that Finch is pissed at the beginning of an answer, but then to his credit, he opens up.
Well, he had to eat crow, and he's a smart guy, and smart guys don't often have to eat crow. But I mean, it's been a curiously stubborn, increasingly eroding hill that he is trying to die on here. And I think that eventually he realized he had to get off it. The usage, the key word in that entire answer was the usage has changed. And
Mike. Yeah.
Well, but yeah, exactly. And Mike Conley, Mike Conley has been a floor general running a half-court offense for 18 plus years. Yeah. Seriously. And all of a sudden, he's like, as he said in the answer to you, which I hope you play, it was a great question. It was the obvious question, in my opinion, in terms of if he's not the person running the offense, then that's a huge disconnect in his mind. I mean, if you're a 37-year-old player who's played like you've been since a teenager in the NBA doing certain things. Right. And as he's put it, now I'm running from side to side. He's basically an outlet corner three guy all of a sudden. And, it's ridiculous. And I'm glad, 35th game into the season that something changed in it a little bit. But the easier change systemically would have been put Nas in for Randle and start that unit, but politically it's not. And that's all right, And also, to be fair, Dante pushes pace and pace pushes ball movement, and ball movement, even when Mike is starting, because of Rudy and Ant, can be a problem. So I won't say that it's entirely Julius Randle's fault. But I will say that the best lineup the Timberwolves have is last year's starting lineup and Nas in for Cat. I mean, it just. Well,
we did see that. We saw that yesterday.
Yeah.
But I think that lineup had played prior to last night. Had played 54 or 57 possessions together. Very, very, very little.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, okay, like all of the four things you said there, I want to open all of those up.
Sounds great.
Let's because Finch said the biggest reason was Mike. I want to start with that. He at
Absolutely.
least used that as his primary motivation, which I got. It was I said this. I remember I was Christmas shopping, so I don't know. I did that kind of late, so mid-December or something like that. And I'm, the mall's crazy, so I have my headphones in, and I was listening to Sam Vecini and Dave DeFore, who are
good dudes.
Good dudes. Also, like, really, I like their watch. I know they watch. They're
Right,
basketball thinkers, and they started some episode talking about how Mike Conley was washed. And that was the first time I know you laugh at that, but it's like it's the same thing. Like when me and you go and we talk about, like, I don't know, the Bucks or something, and because we don't watch every single game, we're gonna there's that context that you miss.
Sure.
And I think the context that they were missing in that case that we happen to have because we watch every single, we're following this team on a day-to-day basis, was my theory, at least, was that it wasn't that Mike was washed, or at least it wasn't certainty that he was washed. It was that he was being used in a different role in the starting lineup, and his minutes shrunk this year. So he's pretty much only playing with the starting lineup. That was basically a very large chunk of the minutes that he was playing. And what that does is, being in the starting lineup last season, I asked him this in the question, I'll play it in a second. But just to explain it a little bit more, like last season, I thought of the Wolves offense as Mike Conley being the primary initiator or the secondary initiator. It was always Ant or Mike. I mean, I don't even know who of the starting lineup would be third. They didn't want Cat.
Right. On the rare occasions you had Slow-Mo,
right?
Not in the starting lineup, but he sometimes would take. But it was also rare that you had Ant, Slow-Mo, and Conley in the lineup for the very reason. Too many cooks in the kitchen again,
Right. Yeah. And so Conley was just at worst second on the way I thought of it, like second on the initiator pecking order when he was out on the floor.
Right. At worst.
And this season he's felt like third. Even in the starting lineup. I asked him about that after the game.
Last season, when you were in the starting lineup, it was like you were the primary and maybe secondary initiator, and just as the rosters change, it's kind of like your second, maybe often third in that group. What was that? Has that kind of been like this season, and what going back to kind of being one or two?
I think that's probably the biggest difference from the 2 years. And if I'm out there and just running corner to corner and not really being myself, you can start anybody at that point, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's what the idea was behind it. Like, hey, let's see what it looks like, coming in with a different unit where you be more ball dominant and not necessarily shoot more, but just feel more injected into the game and play my role the best I can.
Or like a point guard.
Yeah.
Britt, Mike plays well. I mean, it's one game, and so it's not like you just wave the wand over it, and and who knows, maybe I'll be proven wrong too that Mike is washed or significantly physically diminished off of what he was last season. I think, well, that's at least why I like the starting lineup change. Is like we get to test some pretty critical theories, and he was a pretty critical player to the team last season, and he's either gotten too old or in the wrong role. And now you're going down a path that I think gives you a chance to allow Mike Conley to be something for this team.
Right.
And given that I don't want to say he was everything last year, but again, those of us who watched all 82 last season know how instrumental Mike Conley was to just the competency of the group and the offense. And hopefully this role allows him to do more of it because it's still going to be the same amount of minutes that he was playing when he was starting, because that was such a small chunk.
Mike Conley is a class act, and he's a wise man. And when you're a wise man, you expect people to defer to your wisdom. You don't demand it because that would be classless, and he's a classy guy. He's not going to say, hey, everybody, listen to me. But he's going to expect the people who are running things to put him in a situation where he is the person dispensing wisdom, whether it's through actions in a half-court offense or in the locker room, having people come up and ask him to explain things, or having players, as Ant does on a regular basis, asking him to explain the dynamics of the NBA.
Yeah.
And the idea, of course, he doesn't mind being the second initiator when it comes to Ant, because they're going to have a conversation over how that's going. Even if Ant is the lead initiator, Conley is the one that's doing the puppet strings for a lot of what Ant does. So Conley feels great about that. Not only is he the initiator a lot of the times, but he is grooming a superstar to be a better superstar. And now you bring in somebody who doesn't have that history with him, whose game is very, very different than the kind of way that Conley and Ant have played in the past. And it is jarring.
Being Randle.
Randle in this case, yes. And it's jarring. You go with it because, that's the way it goes for a while. But sooner or later, and he had the wrist injury. I mean, there's a lot of things going on there. But what it comes down to is it is a blow to your ego that you hide. You just want the respect of who you are. You take 10 million a year instead of 15 or whatever. And you just say to yourself, I am the guy who is the dispenser of wisdom on this team, and my wisdom generating abilities have been taken away by my role. And I think that, as much as anything, is responsible for his desultory play this year. It's, he is not comfortable in his own skin. It's been pretty obvious. I'm not saying that the right-handed floater he's missing 70% of the time is suddenly going to be fixed. Yeah, but I think the things that really matter about Mike Conley will be fixed if he has a role commensurate with his wisdom on this team.
I thought, and we'll talk about Dante too, and that's a whole another segment.
Yeah.
But what I want to say related to Conley too, because I think this connects, is the starting lineup change obviously is going to have a ripple effect on the entirety of the rotation, and we'll kind of track what trends are and what ends up being. It seems like Finch, with his rotations, his main thing is he's targeting a second group. Mm-hmm. And we've been talking about that all over the course of the year. You called the Gobert, Conley, and the bench three thing the golden lineup. They made the change, so it was Randle and Minot and that bench three. I called that the bronze lineup just because you called it the golden lineup. There's
right.
Nothing really behind that. And so interesting that I put down in my notes right away last night is like, what is it that that next group that they're going to look to that's going to play the second most amount of minutes as a five-some other than the starting five? And what that was last night was last season's starting lineup.
When Cat was hurt,
which was Nas in there for them. But it wasn't only the second most used lineup. It was also the closing lineup, kind of. At least in the second quarter, so to end the first half, they closed with Gobert, Reed, McDaniels, Edwards, and in Conley, and then got back to that same point in the fourth quarter to close the game. However, Finch opted to have DiVincenzo in there instead of Reed. They went a little bit smaller to close the game. So it was Gobert, McDaniels, Edwards, DiVincenzo, and Conley. Again, it'll be interesting to see if that is in fact the closing lineup that they end up pointing to. What I think is interesting is Conley is in both of those closing lineups, and they had recently gotten away from Mike Conley being a part of closing lineups, which I got, and they've been functioning, but it's a repurposing, right, of the entire rotation, but again, specifically a repurposing of how Mike Conley is being used. And that is another way to tap into the good stuff that Conley did last year. He was so important for crunch time. a season ago when this young group would lose their head sometimes, and Conley was the old head who knew how to get it back on straight. I thought that was an important piece there too.
And to be fair to Finch, he is worried about ripple effects. He is not, it's not like this guy for this guy. Okay, there we are. What does this guy for this guy mean down the road? And in this particular case, DDV for Conley, what does that do to Na? And Na is having some, he's going through some stuff right now. He's suddenly playing, he's had like 3 or 4 clunkers in a row, I think. And I think that Na and DiVincenzo on the court together in that springy second unit was really, really good for him. And that isn't happening in this new configuration as much. And neither one of them are really a point guard, but when they're on the floor together, they can make it, they can stitch it together a lot better because they both like to move. They both are watching who else is moving. And if nothing else, they both know how to do that weave. If anybody's in trouble, the other guy comes out and does that, circle around, and you get off it, get back on it. Just having those kinds of habits happen has been great for Na because he learned to his chagrin that he was not a point guard during the preseason. Right. And suddenly he had a guy that had his mindset the same way. And then you add Nas, and those 3 guys, let's face it, are the core of aesthetically good and most of the time productively good basketball for this team this year. They move the ball, they move without the ball, and they make quick decisions. The 3 main components of the Finch flow offense. And they are arguably the 3 who do it best. And so when they're on the court all at the same time, there's a synergistic effect that spreads to whoever the other 2 people are on the court. But what you've done here to activate Conley, and I would argue Rudy too, is you've kind of disrupted the coolness of that trio. You don't get them on the court as often, I don't think.
Yep, and I think that was part of the reason. I think that's exactly what Finch was talking about when he had the magic bullet comment was, are you sure you really want me to change the starting lineup and let go of the one thing that has not only been good, but great? Like when the 3 bench guys are on the floor together this season, it's been great, period. Whoever, choose your 2, the gold, bronze, who Ant, whatever. Like you have those 3 out there. And so that, if we want to say theoretically negative externality of this starting lineup change and rotation change, it would be that we'll probably get fewer minutes where it's all 3, it's that whole bench 3 together. But I think that's okay. I think it's what you said. It's finding players that they happen to be 3 players who enacted the Finch system. And what this is going to test is, okay, can there be 2 of them? And can you add a Josh Minot in there who kind of seems like he plays that way some? Can Conley, when he gets back in with that group, do that? Julius Randle's been playing with that 3 a lot. Can he kind of click into that, even if it's just maybe he's out there with Dante and Nikhil and no Nas? I think it's a rational risk, I think, to break it up to see if you can find other side. And if you can't, okay, then you can. It's not like you can't find tweaks back in that rotation to get to that. You could still take Dante out after 6 minutes in the game, get him back in at the start of the second quarter when Nas and Nikhil are in there. Like it's not like they can't find that anymore. They're just going to find it. They're just going to find it a little bit less in that look. And theoretically, some opportunity cost there. But at least for last night, it seemed to work well.
And I think that fans get frustrated by the salary cap politics of what you have to deal with. But what fans need to realize is that you don't have salary cap politics unless you've had a lot of really good success recently, and a lot of people are getting paid. And so that's how you get this. I mean, Wolves fans are going, what's going on? We never had this before. Well, that's because, you had a bunch of players who weren't worth max money. And so, and so now I think you have this situation where, of course, you've got to enable Rudy and you've got to enable Mike to some extent because he is a skeleton key on some other players, specifically Rudy, but it can also be Ant. You're paying Rudy, excess of $30 million for the next 3 seasons. Unfortunately, is a $4 million expiring. It'd be great if they can re-sign him, but if you're looking at who you favor and who you don't, you have to make these hard calculations. Dante's here for 2 more years after this one, guaranteed. You have to look at your timelines. You know that Nas is going to be somebody you want to re-sign. And so you have these situations where politics plays. The most obvious politics going on right now, of course, is figuring out how to maximize Randle's value as a trade piece or as something else moving forward. But these are part of the equation. You look at the Denver Nuggets after they won last year and they had to lose Bruce Brown and, the configuration and gyrations. And now they're talking about trading Michael Porter Jr., which may or may not be, absurd. I haven't followed that team enough to know. But the point being, if you've had a really successful run, especially in the new CBA era, you're going to have to deal with, you're going to have to be pinched in ways that you're not used to being pinched. You can't just play your best guys indefinitely because that equation is going to change.
Let me grab our first break here. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. And while Falling Knife is always a great spot to get a beer during a Wolves game or otherwise, they know many people do dry January, taking the month off from consuming alcohol. So they are doing high January at Falling Knife, where they are running a series of discounts on their THC infused beverages. If you're on the YouTube page right now, I have those up on the screen. They have a lot of different options there that they can, and they have cool art that Falling Knife has on all of their cans. But the promotion is $1 off cans in the tap room if you just go in there to have one in the tap room. Otherwise, they do 4 packs to go, and those 4 packs are $4 off. They have a wide arrangement of THC beverages, and then also for January, Falling Knife has an expanded list of non-alcoholic cocktails. They have that all the time, but they expand that out for January because they know a lot of people are abstaining or moderating their alcohol intake. Point being, Falling Knife is still a great spot to watch the Wolves road trip this week, even New Orleans or Orlando on Thursday. And no matter what you are or are not drinking, Falling Knife would love to have you come through the tap room to watch a game. That's Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis. And then today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks, as it is every day. And the 2 that I had on here looking at the Wolves slate where I was looking at Rudy. They took it off here. They got it up to 12.5 rebounds for Rudy here. I liked Rudy to again be a force on the glass. I had him over having more than an 11.5 rebounds. And then Julius Randle, I think we're seeing a little bit of a repurposing. I'm going to say he has less than 18.5 points against the Pelicans tonight. Got the whole slate of NBA games if you want to put together a daily fantasy lineup at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. It's Tuesday. They got Taco Tuesday promotions going on. And if you're new to Prize Picks, you can sign up at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. And if you use the promo code Dane, that helps us, lets them know that you came from us. And it also gets you a $50 credit into your account when you make your first $5 wager. That's prizepicks.com, Prize Picks app.
I found that double IPA.
You did?
Double verbal tip or whatever it was there that I've been looking for, because you mentioned it, and I kept on looking in the liquor stores that I go to, and I didn't see it. And I finally found it the other day. It's excellent, as I expected. Verbal tip is probably my favorite beer overall ever. And so
ever.
Well, I mean, I would, because what is a beer? A beer isn't like a single malt or, I guess it's wine. It isn't like you sit and savor it for, a special occasion of 45 minutes or something.
Right.
It's something you go to because you want a good beer and it delivers over and over and over again. That's the best beer ever,
Yeah.
And so, and there's a lot of great ones. Don't get me wrong. It just so happens that Verbal Tip happens to do that for me better than any of them, but the double is actually very good. Anyway.
And they say podcast advertising doesn't work. Look at that.
Well, and you know me, I don't advertise. I just tell you what I think. There have been times. Remember the time I said there were 365 days of adventures was too expensive, or I could really, So
that wasn't great.
Sometimes they win and sometimes they lose when I speak my mind.
That's fair. Yeah. Check out Following Night. Fun place to go watch the games. Let's talk about the DiVincenzo element of this. I could play a clip here. Just it was interesting. I thought Dante's whole. I would recommend. I'm not going to play a ton of his clips, but I thought he had his media session last night was informative on a lot of levels. But he just kind of talked about what the change in the starting, like the motivation behind the starting lineup was, and kind of what it changes stylistically. Here's DiVincenzo.
So the biggest change you would say of just kind of the overall thing is just quicker decision making. And it's just kind of an instigator for that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that the bench, the first whatever games. I think we just pushed the pace. I think that's kind of what we were trying to do. Me, Nikhil, and Nas, and just doing that in the first unit, eliminating all the X and O's and trying to overthink things and where does Ant want it, just eliminate that. Once we get to the second, third action, now you have the ball in Julius's hands, Ant's hands, and just pushing the pace allows for more spacing on the floor.
So Britt, this is a play off of if you just popped into watching Wolves games this year, right? You would go, that team has spacing issues, right?
Absolutely.
You don't got to wait more than 4 or 5 possessions to see some sort of crashing problem of a lack of space. And so that's been something, we've been trying to figure out all season. And when I've asked Finch about it a few times over the course of the year, what he's repeatedly said is, I don't see it to be spacing issues. I see it to be ball holding issues,
Absolutely.
which we can picture that just as well too, right? And Julius predominantly, two of the primary culprits there. But by playing faster, getting into it, playing more of that bench way that Dante has been doing the whole season, there's an added, not just there's pace in getting it up the floor, which we see from DiVincenzo, but DiVincenzo also injects a pace to the half court of the ball moving, of getting off of it and going, not just getting off of it and going to stand, interchanging. He sprints in the half court setting, and by putting him into the starting lineup, you're going to get more of that. You're going to get even more of that if you put Naz Reid in with that group too. And we know for a fact that if you put all three of Dante, Naz, and Nikhil in there together, you're going to get a lot of it. And so I think that was, part of what justifies whatever compromises they had to make there. Is DiVincenzo injects a movement to this thing in a pace that should theoretically limit ball holding, which should improve spacing, and it looked to be that way last night.
Well, and I asked Finch after the game, I said, does pace affect your ball movement? And he almost said, like, unfortunately it does. I mean, it shouldn't, but it does on our team, for whatever reason. And it makes sense to me because first of all, there's a lot of thirsty people in that line. And if the guy with the ball is ahead of you, you want to get up there.
Mm-hmm.
and when you're moving like that, then all of a sudden, defenders are moving to counter you. And, all of a sudden you're in a flow, whether you want to be or not. You're not waiting. And that's the thing that has driven me crazy about this team on offense is the waiting. People are waiting for something to happen rather than forcing something to happen.
Right.
And it works for Julius Randle. That's I've got to say that that style works for him, and he is most effective when he can wait. But on the other hand, I don't want to totally slag him for that, because I've seen him in that 4-out or even 5-out system. He plays with the second unit where he doesn't weight as much, and he's still a fairly effective cog in that team. So, but Ant in particular is so much better passer when he's on the bounce. And when he's looking around, his head is up. And when he is confronting one and soon two defenders and trying to dribble around them, he's a fantastic most of the time with the handle. But he has to concentrate on his handle when that happens. And he's trying to clear people so that he can get off the ball rather than getting off the ball sooner. And I think Conley alluded to this in maybe a question to you last night or some other time recently, where you've got to get off the ball before the double comes. And if you see the double coming, and Ant, knows his importance to the team and scoring, especially recently, and so he's a little leery of getting off the ball so early in the possession because he's afraid he might not get it back, or he's afraid that it'll go to somebody who's going to miss a shot or whatever. But the offense would work so much better if Ant either got off the ball or took his dribble away from them so that people have to move. Right. And the more you move, the more your teammates have to move, unless they're stupid and they take up your space that you're moving into, Right. And so Dante is a catalyst for all this because he's already up there. He's up there before, 6 seconds are gone on the clock. You've got 18 to play, and here come the latecomers, but they're coming faster than they usually come, and defenses are reacting, and Dante's a three-point threat anyway, so he's immediately extending the defense
right
for the Randles and the Rudies to go post up if they need to. I just think it's, in that respect, Dante's got a lot of cool the thing that jumped out at you was 40% accuracy on 7 threes a game the last 2 seasons, and you thought, okay, here's this. And I think I oversold his point guard capabilities before, but what he does, being smart with the pace, being tough on defense, and great on rebounding.
He had nine rebounds last night.
I'll tell you, the dude plays so much bigger than he is in many respects. I think I mentioned to you last night, I would not be adverse to seeing him and Jaden as combo forwards in a small ball lineup. I think they could do it. It would take some adjustment, and depending on who the big is, it would be a big.
They closed that way last night, basically.
Yeah, right.
I do think if there is an area that I've seen at least situational regression from Conley, if I had to pick one, I would say it's defensively. And on the ball, I don't think he's bad there. I'm not saying that Conley is a bad on the ball defender. He is smaller. He's about 5 inches shorter than DiVincenzo.
Right.
But I think Dante's just a better defender, and I thought absolutely like the critical play of the game, or at least the fourth quarter, was DiVincenzo gets switched onto James Harden, stonewalls him into one of those rare, where it's like the Okogie one. Remember when Okogie blocked at the top of the show? It was kind of like that.
Right.
And what ends up happening is Harden takes an awful shot. I think Ant gets the defensive rebound, runs up, finds Jaden in the corner. It's a little kind of double clutch 3, but whatever. Yep. Jaden made it. And then the next 2 possession, Ant 3. I think that defensive stop by DiVincenzo sparked so much. I think it was a 1-point game at that point.
Right.
And that play specifically is something that Mike can't do. And I think by something that's going to come out of this is this starting lineup is going to be better at defense. Now there's a lot of teams, again, just based on Conley's size, that you kind of have to give him a weird matchup against because there's so much better. The Clippers were like that.
Right.
Remember, we were sitting there before the game, and I'm like, well, part of this just makes sense to not start Conley because this Clippers team is gigantic.
Right.
They go Chris Dunn, Norman Powell, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Zubats. Like, who's the Conley matchup in in that? So I just think he gives them a little bit more size, which gives them a little bit more defense. And what is the thing that, as we've asked 1,000 times, what does the starting lineup need to do to be better? Rudy, Finch, whoever, they all say it's the defense. With that group, we have to play great defense so as to start playing offense. They have to play when Rudy's out there, and if that starting lineup, they have to be like last season's team because they're just not that good at offense.
Right.
So adding more defense into that starting group, I think is something that will actually help that group's offense in the way that good defense helped the offense a season ago. More bad shots taken by opponents, more turnovers generated, more defensive rebounds secured so as to end the possession and then go like they did in the fourth quarter and play faster. I think that's a big part of it.
I would cut into that argument a little bit by saying I think Conley is better on defense than you think he is. I think that he's
You didn't like my 3 times where I'm like, I think he's still good. I still think he's good.
Well,
go ahead. You're right. Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is what you're ignoring, and you know me, I love DDV's defense. I really do, but he's a gambler. And he is somebody who gets in your face and can commit some silly fouls or also be caught trying to get the steal or whatever. And so it's a different type of defense, but I agree with you. It's a more opportunistic. Mike Conley is not an opportunistic defender, except when he's getting picked and falling down, or reaching in, poke checking steals and stuff. I mean, he's a different style. But what I will say about Mike is he understands where he needs to be, and he gets there commensurate with his abilities. Your greater point, and where I will totally concede this, is that if you can get Conley on ball needing help, and it's going to happen if he's on ball on the, strong side or weak side for that matter, then you could start the rotation. You could put the Wolves in rotation in a way they don't want to be. And I think that is definitely an advantage of DiVincenzo being in the starting lineup. And if you were to ask me today, I would not have said this the first month of the season because I thought Conley played really well on defense the first month. But if you ask me today, are the Wolves a better defensive team, especially, well, not even overall, with DiVincenzo at the point and Conley at the point, I would say yes. And I would say that is true both in the half court, but especially true in that place where it's not really transition, but it's not half court. It's like one of these things where you're sorting things out as you go up the court. And I think that's where the opportunism and the toughness of DiVincenzo is really helpful.
One thing you've really liked about Dante all season is how he plays off of Randle and just kind of seems to maybe get him more than others. I always think it's like a little bit overrated that they were on the Knicks together. It's like, they played like 20 games together last season. That's the only season they were on the same team. But I think you're right in that Dante does still get him more than anybody else and puts him in situations they play off of each other well. So I'd say that to be another thing off of the starting lineup is, can Dante DiVincenzo's presence in the starting lineup, obviously alongside Julius Randle, help Julius and get a better version of Julius in the starting 5, which Julius has been good with the bench group when he's out there with Dante and the other guys, but can he get more of that same energy from Julius in the starting 5 just because he's out there with him?
Right. And let me preface a little bit. One of the reasons that the Dante Randle thing was impressed upon me is that Dante talked about Randle. He said, I was lost. I was coming off the bench. I wasn't getting good minutes. And Randle was finding me and getting me shots, open shots. And essentially what he was saying is he put me on the map in terms of the rotation for the Knicks. And I think there was a debt there that Dante wants to repay. And I think that if you listen to him all the time, and I think this is, every time I hear him say it, I cringe. But, we got to work to Ant and Julius. We have to get Ant and Julius the ball. It's like 1 and 1A. And I'm thinking, no, there's 1, and then there's some distant 2s and 3s here. I don't want to have Randle be like a co-feature of the offense. And I know that's actually what Finch, I think, kind of dreams about too, and I don't think that works. Mm-hmm. But in answer to your question after all that, I think the more that Dante's movement orientation and quick decision-making orientation, because of the pace, helps Randle rather than having Dante assist Randle by knowing when to move off the ball when he's going into one of his whirligig, hold the ball and then, whip around and suddenly find a guy wide open. Is both of them are two guys working well together, but one of those systems helps the other 3 people on the court as well. And I'm just not a believer in the heliocentric Julius Randle experience. And I think Dante can enable that. And I think he can also enable the Julius Randle we see when the 4 bench guys are on the court with him. And that's the one I want him to enable.
Grab another break here. Today's show is brought to you by Dewar Jeans, DUER, and the new year is a time for a refresh in many ways. Maybe that connects to your wardrobe. And Dewar is should be at the top of your list. They have pants, jeans, shirts, and they're all just some of the most comfortable and reliable items that I own personally. And I think it's worthwhile considering adding them to your collection. They have new styles and washes added every season. Just some more on their website now. They all come with that comfort and function, which I love. I wore a pair of my Dewar jeans to the Wolves game last night. They're a staple for me in my wardrobe because, 1, I think they look good, and 2, they are comfortable to wear in any occasion, to work, dinner, parties, whatever it might be. I love wearing mine. They're developed out of recycled material, plant-based fiber, and that's what kind of breeds that natural breathability and softness and moisture absorption. You'll find me in my Dewar jeans this year. If you haven't ordered your own Dewars yet, now is the time to update your wardrobe. Check out Dewar's flagship stores in LA or Denver, or you can shop online at shopdewar.com/DaneMoore. Right now, my listeners get 20% off their first purchase when they use my exclusive URL, shopdewar.com/DaneMoore. That's in the show notes. This really is a great deal. Don't wait to get 20% off. Go now to shopdewar.com/DaneMoore. All right, Britt. I think the next thing to talk about, and this kind of connects to the last few games for the Wolves. It's been 6 days since you and I have done an episode together.
Right.
And in that time, the Wolves lost to the Celtics. After that game, Ant went off about his frustration with receiving double teams. Obviously, everyone's seen that by now. Talking about how he doesn't want to be a passer, wants to be a scorer. So then 2 more games happen. He has 53 points and 2 assists with actually good playmaking in that game. Just nobody could make a shot. He was both a scorer and a passer, I thought, in that game. And then same thing last night. He kind of came at you in waves. What was his final stat line? 37 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. He was 6 of 13 from 3, 8 of 16 from 2. And I'm kind of stealing Jace's term that he was asking some of the players in the locker room after the game about Ant, but it's force. Ant is, again, playing with that downhill force. And rather than kind of recoiling when the second player comes, he's trying to turn the corner, get downhill before they can kind of take that force away from him. I'm just, again, we haven't talked about it on the pod. I'm kind of curious your view of this most recent piece of Ant's arc of season 5.
Right. I mean, if you pull back the lens a little bit, you see that it's just the normal ups and downs of a 23-year-old guy,
Right.
finding his way. I don't ever want the honesty taken away from him. I did not mind the comment of, hey, I don't want to pass. I want to shoot. That, I'm 23 years old. You feel me? It's like, this is what I do, I do think, first of all, I guess not first of all, but the assists, I went over the assists of last night's game. I saw, I revisited the game. The generosity, first of all, cut everybody's assist by a third. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, there was an inbounds play where somebody drove through 3 people, and the inbounder, it was Ant, one of his 8 assists. I mean, Ant had 5 or 6 assists last night. He did not have 8. 2 of them were just absurd. And there's a lot of absurd assists going on right now.
Well, that's just why
I don't think it's just led to the Wolves. Yeah. I think it's kind of a league-wide issue. But it's like, the John Stockton scoring method is live and well in the NBA right now. And, don't take all those assists there.
Well, don't use assists as a barometer of effective playmaking, I think is what we learned in those.
Yeah, it's kind of like blocks for defense. Right. You're right. Exactly. I mean, it's one of those things where, but I mean, at least the way people need to make assists worth something again is all. It's really been cheapened, the inflation in assists. Anyway, that's my little rant. What I will say is the assists that were impressive from Ant last night were 3-point plays for other people. He hit Jaden for a couple, he hit Nas for a couple, and they were really the ones that pleased me the most were during that second quarter run they were making, where 2 times he came down and found a wide open Nas in the corner. For whatever reason, the Clippers had just decided, that Nas wasn't worth guarding in that left corner. And the first one, Nas clanked. The very next possession, he came down and did the exact same thing. Nas splashed it. Nas went on to have a really good game. He was kind of having a pretty good game before then, so it wasn't a catalyst, but it was an example of Ant having faith in people, even if they miss a shot, getting it open. And the other thing I liked about it was there wasn't any dilly-dallying around. He did it early in the clock. It was a wide open shot. Right. It was taken, boom, boom, boom. Let's get that rhythm going. Ant, we've known since the Iowa Ants experience, he likes pace. And if the more freewheeling you can be, the better. And
he likes others to pull him into pace. He isn't necessarily like a pace.
I think that's really accurate. I think that is he will allow the prevailing tenor of the game to dictate what he's doing. I think that's a really good observation, because you're right. He's perfectly comfortable, holding hands, walking up the court with Mike and Rudy. Hey, this is the way we want to go. Okay, you take the ball up.
8 seconds on the shot clock.
But it is fun when he's activated that way, and in his stints where the Wolves, not coincidentally, were rolling, that's what we saw. And that is when he is a force. He can be a force on his own, also, just by the nature of his pure talent and dribbling, as you mentioned, dribbling around defenders before the double team comes. And his pull-up is increasingly accurate, I think, especially when he's locked in on big shots. He won the game for them last night after DiVincenzo shut Harden down. And that no 3 for Harden, 6 points for Ant, plus 3 for McDaniels.
Right.
I mean, it was a 2-point game. That's an 11, 12-point swing right there.
Right.
That was when everybody kind of breathed and said, oh, it looks like they may actually win this game. And then
everything got weird.
No, I mean,
Yeah, that's the one.
Nas made some stupid fouls. Rudy had stone hands on a. Hey, Finch puts Rudy in the game to get a rebound, and Rudy on the defensive rebound gets the ball and it falls out of his hands. So
that was tough.
So that was, anyway. But in answer to your question, Ant being the operative word when Ant is in a slump is joyless, because he is an infectious player when he's playing really well. He wants to join a crowd of people playing good basketball. Mm-hmm. And as a result, when your best player wants to bring everybody with you with their stupendous skills, it's a party. And that happens at both ends of the court. I mean, I kind of wish Ant would be more infectious on defense. But, since we're talking about offense, I do think that he is somebody who, if Ant gets like 2 assists in 4 possessions, the Wolves are rolling. They're going to their next 3 or 4 possessions, at the very least, are going to be active and probably well executed. He is a catalyst in that sense, and that's what a superstar should do. And the key to Ant, the reason Ant probably has more enthusiasm and praise behind him than his career accomplishments would warrant at the current time, is because of that joy. Mm-hmm. People love to watch that joy because it is contagious, not only for the players on the court, but for the players watching, people watching.
Right. When I think of force, I think Ant is a force in his pull-up three-point ability. Like, that has become a force to, start a game with, a series of punches, or last night use that to knock them out. Right. He's also a force, I guess, in a more like literal sense of like downhill pressure on the basket when the floor is more spread. And I was bumping you during the game, and I'm had to go back and watch it some to figure out why this was the case outside of the starting lineup, or what groups it was. But I kept being like, I kept going to you being like, that spread floor look, and Rudy's on the floor. It's 4 out, 1 in, which,
right.
You would say the Thunder play in a spread floor look when it's 4 out and 1 in around sure. Hartenstein. Sometimes Hartenstein's at the break, right? In the slot there,
right.
and you kind of playing DHO off of him. It was the most, at least for this season, I thought the most it felt like a spread floor look, even when Rudy was on the floor. And I think a more spread floor look makes Ant more forceful in the space that he has to attack. But I also think the spread floor thing is good for Rudy too. That's what Utah was. I asked him about the game, and mostly, and it's kind of for the video, but he was excited when I asked him about the idea of the Wolves playing in more of a spread floor look. He likes that. I asked him about it after the game.
I think it was more of like a spread look at times when you're out, even you're out there too. When you are in a spread floor lineup, how does that change your offensive game individually?
I think it makes it harder on the defense. I mean, we were a different team, but I was in Utah and we were the number 1 offense in the league at some point. And, it was because we were playing a brand of basketball that was pretty simple, right? I was rolling to the basket, bringing a lot of attention, and then the guards were just trying to make the right play, and we're getting a lot of threes and a lot of dunks, and obviously different. It was a few years ago, but I think it forces the defense to make a lot of decisions, and then it's on us to space for each other, run for each other, and make the easy, obvious right play for each other. And when we do that, it's fun first of all, and it's hard to guard. And I think our offense is good.
So I'm with all of the reasons that he said there, but the one thing that I think is big as it connects to Rudy, because all that stuff, the spread, it helps Ant. There's going to be more threes available, all that Utah-y stuff. But what it does for Rudy is it makes stuff more simple. And where he struggles offensively is in the complicated. His involvement in the complicated. Not that he's a bad decision maker. I think Rudy Gobert is a really high IQ player, but it's so difficult for him, specifically when the ball is in his hands, to make the right move forward in the offense because he doesn't have a dribbling package. He doesn't have a finishing package. And in Utah, they removed it. They simplified Rudy's role by just having him repeatedly be a screener and a diver, and surrounded by four. The threat of Rudy on the dive, which maybe if you've only watched Rudy ever play with the Wolves, you go, that's not scary. Well, it was for about 5 seasons in Utah, and they were an elite offensive team around Rudy Gobert. He can absolutely be a piece in a good offensive team. I just think you need to simplify, minimize the total amount of things that you're asking him to do, and let others be empowered by him. There's so little of the Rudy Gobert like magnetism to himself that is not a thing. You like bringing 2 onto the roller, bringing the tag in. Teams just don't do that against Rudy, and they had to in Utah because he'd roll down the floor, and if you didn't come and bring that second body, it was space enough where they could throw that lob, and he's dunking it. And I think if you can put him in that position more, he's going to be better offensively, which has all of these like energy suck, positive vibes that come, or that removes that energy suck. I think that's huge. And I think it just fits the personnel better. Just a commitment to playing that way, which requires some parameters of Ant and Julius, who are the ones who most, kind of take away the Wolves spread floor look by trying to get into their bag at the nail or post up down there. I just, if there was one thing you could get Ant and Julius to do more that I think would make a world of difference offensively, is just commit to spreading the floor more when you're out there around Rudy. There's gonna be plenty of other minutes in the game where you're not out there with him. Get into your bag, go do that, go do your thing. But you need to be so conscientious of Rudy's presence out there, and what you do can simplify what Rudy does, which is going to delete the stuff that they're annoyed by. I just think this is the path to me offensively for this team.
I think the key word is simplify there. And you're talking a lot about it being conceptual simplification in terms of X's and O's, but it really is about clean. It's about one guy I got to beat here. Nobody is coming. They don't have time to double on me when I've got the ball with my back to the basket. If that's the way it is, usually it won't be. But the point being is his hand-eye coordination is bad. His hands itself are bad. I think they've regressed some, but I also think they've never been great. And so therefore, these passes, Randle in particular likes to do them. He's actually good at them, unfortunately. This little shovel pass, interior, big to big, that's not going to work with Rudy Gobert.
How did Cat do it? How did Cat do it?
Yeah, right.
Over the top to Rudy.
Exactly. Yeah. And Slow-Mo, who's even more than Mike, is like the magician. Here's the ball, Rudy. It looks like I'm going to shoot. I'm not going to shoot. I'm just going to throw it up there for you, buddy. Yeah. And that kind of simplification. So if you were going to be in his space, make the ball higher than anybody else and let him know where the ball is. I mean, like D'Lo, I think D'Lo like purposefully tortured Rudy, by making these slick passes that look great for D'Lo and almost always surprise the shit out of Rudy. And I think that, it was one of the reasons those two were oil and water. And keep it simple with Rudy, not only in terms of how many people are around him spatially, but what his options are. You do not want him. I know that, one of the worst things that happened when Gobert was traded here was the conversation of, we can unlock you. We can do a lot more with you on offense than Utah did. Well, Quinn Snyder was smarter than Tim Connelly and Chris Finch on that particular equation. He knew what Rudy could do. And he also, to your point, when Rudy does those things, it affects the offense far more than if you're playing these games where Rudy suddenly is some guy threading his way through two players to, score a basket. When that happens, everybody just, wipes the sweat off their brow and hopes it doesn't try to happen again,
One more break here. Today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino. And I can say firsthand, the watch parties that they do there are awesome. It was really fun when we were down there for when Kyle and I did a show and did the watch party for that Wolves-Kings game back in November. And the thing is, for the Vikings playoffs, is they are going to have watch parties every game in the Parlay Lounge at Treasure Island Resort and Casino. And for every Vikings game, so that starts with this coming Monday when they play the Rams. There's free food at kickoff in the Parlay Lounge there for people who are there. It's $4 Miller Lights, $5 Absolute Wild Berry drink specials. They do a bunch of giveaways during the game, whether it be gear or just in casino giveaways. If you're thinking about places to go to watch the Vikings in the playoffs, I really would recommend Treasure Island Resort and Casino. You can visit ticasino.com for more details. And then today's show is also brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company. And maybe one of your New Year's resolutions is to fix that problem in your home, whatever it might be. You have a home improvement project that you need to get done. Your Home Improvement Company can do all of it. But the two deals that they have going on right now are 50% off when you purchase 4 triple pane windows. And then they also have a 30% off deal on bathroom renovations. It can be simple tub to shower conversion or a whole big bathroom renovation. Those are 30% off. Your Home Improvement Company is always zero money down, zero interest, and zero payments until 2026. If you do have a home improvement need, we would love you to support a longtime sponsor of the pod in Your Home Improvement Company. You can do that by calling 866-777-YHIC or by going to yourhomeimprovementco.com. It's Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better. All right, Britt, the last thing I think we need to get to is Randle. And we're about 4 weeks away from the trade deadline, and that's never a good way to start talking about a player is by mentioning that there's the trade deadline coming up there. But he really struggled last night. Was not a good body language game from him either. He had 5 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 turnovers. He was 2 of 7 from 2-point range, 0 of 3 from 3-point range. I guess micro and macro. Julius's game last night, winning through it, and just what they kind of need from him while he is still, a big part of this. He is still a very big part of this team. The coach is still very committed to him. And even if you want to talk about the trade deadline, it's extremely difficult, I think, if you mess around with it, to find realistic paths to just be like, get rid of them, bring something back in. That's kind of a hard game to play with him. So just his play and kind of future, where as of January 7th, are you at on that?
I think it's a bad situation. And so the proverbial statement is you make the most of a bad situation. What is the most? What does the most mean? I think in this particular case, a straight having him off the roster or addition by subtraction is an option. I do not think it's one that Finch and Conley will countenance. I think that they still have the, you got to get off Gobert arrogance to them that is well earned. I mean, they were mocked around the league for that Gobert trade, and they were derided by self-important skeptics like me and you, saying that, that they need to do something different. And they said, no, we're going to run it back, and we're going to run it back better. And they went to the Western Conference Finals. The difference right now is the commitment to Cat and Rudy together was going to be an indefinitely long commitment. It turns out it was less because of Cat's salary and all that other stuff that turned out with a new CBA. But the point being, they went into it knowing the commitment was solid. The commitment to Julius Randle cannot be solid unless you're willing to get rid of Nas. And that is ridiculous. I mean, that is just ridiculous. And so I don't see how you gyrate the salary cap and make something flexible and keep Nas Reed at the same time that you're getting the most with a commitment beyond whatever this is to Julius Randle. That is why it's a bad situation. Can Randle himself adapt? I think that I continue to believe, especially after seeing Randle with a second unit, that it just makes so much sense. I mean, I've been saying this since September, so it's not a surprise to anybody. Nas in the starting lineup and Randle coming in with other people where his heliocentrism and his ball dominance may not be as injurious as it is when you have Rudy Gobert on the floor. You just got through, it was textbook what you said about Gobert. You know the way Randle plays, that's the opposite of what Rudy needs. And then we were talking about how Gobert and Ant crimp each other's style in a half-court system. You can't have a worse third cog in that conversation than the way Randle plays. It is just, I continue to defend the trade. I know a lot of people think that is incredibly silly and stubborn position on my part. I think that what you get out of DiVincenzo and what you get in terms of future flexibility, yes, I underestimated Cat's contribution and versatility to what's going on. But I also think that this has the makings of being a team that can be rescued, that can be a dangerous team in the playoffs if things work out. Randle is going to be a bad fit because of the salary situation and what he's, the options, the Nas situation, the Nikhil situation, who you're keeping, who you're not keeping, what you have to do. All of that is not a good situation. Making the most out of it means getting something for it that is better than you expect. And Randle has his virtues, and if they can lean into the virtues, and more importantly, if Randle can learn to lean into his virtues in a way that I see his value in the NBA as being a second unit guy who could squash opposing centers on defense with his defense and can be that heliocentric scoring force against second units. I see that as a really vital, valuable player who won't be here long-term with the Wolves, but can establish that identity on a winning team with the Wolves. I think that's the best case situation going forward for him.
So a couple of different things I want to get to from that. And it's not as simple as if he comes off the bench, he plays with them. I'm not talking to you here necessarily, but we get this a lot. But just because he comes off the bench wouldn't mean that he wouldn't be playing with the starters or Ant and Rudy and the issues that you're laying out right there, because that's not how rotation. It's not hockey subs, right?
Sure.
1 or 2 guys come in. They have found ways, and even did last night, to both start Randle and get him to play a lot of his minutes with the group that he's good at playing with. Probably even through this rotation, found a way to get him more of that.
Right.
He comes out, they start the game, he comes out, gets subbed out 6 minutes into the game. And, that's, what is it here? For Nas and Conley come into the game, right? And then with 1.5 minutes left in the first quarter, he subs back in. He's been on the bench for 4.5 minutes there, and he comes into the game and he's out there with the lineup that's best for him. Reed and Randle, Dante, Nikhil, and I guess it was Mike there. But him with
it could be mine, right?
Yeah, and it did. It ended up being that by the second quarter. But there's ways to start him and get him to playing with a group that is befitting of him in all the ways you just laid out. The problem is you are sacrificing the first 6 minutes of the first quarter and the third quarter, or any minutes that the starters are out there, by having him be out there with these guys that he is not a good fit with. Right. And when he subbed out of the game, 6 minutes into the game, the Wolves had 7 points. That group is not able to score with any sort of consistency when he's out there with the starters. And I really do think, as you said, so much of it is about the Gobert fit there. And so I think if you're having a real practical conversation about like making the change, and if you're entering that conversation in good faith about really considering the possibility of making that change, you would go, what we need to do is break up Gobert and Randle even more. And to do that, you need to have one of the two. You would need to have one of the two of them, or a way to do that would be having one of the two of them come off of the bench. And I can't see them picking Gobert to be that guy, as he's someone they're more committed to, has a track record of driving high level winning on this team. But I don't know. It's just, this is where the fit and the rotation and the overall style of how the roster is built just doesn't really fit together, because I think Finch is actually doing a pretty good job of finding lineups that Julius is good in. He's just starting him in this group that is so bad for him and is so bad for the group. But you have to start him to be able to get to that thing, kinda. And that's just a 2-minute answer of saying, it's not a very good fit.
You have the way that he doesn't fit with Rudy, we just got through talking about. We talked about the way he doesn't fit with Mike at the beginning of this pod. Mm-hmm. Those are foundational players. Those are the core, veteran leaders on this team that need to feel comfortable if this team is going to make any headway when it matters. Mm-hmm. And so the opportunity cost of placating him is steep. And so that is the way it goes. The guy can opt in for $31 million into this team next year if he wishes. That is his option. And if he isn't traded, I think that's a better than 50-50 chance, quite frankly. Because
that's the case right there for addition by subtraction. I do not think it would be, if you just traded him in a salary dump type of trade at the deadline, that it would be necessarily be addition by subtraction to the team this season. I actually think they would lose some juice that you would feel.
I agree.
And it would at least be like neutral, Mm-hmm. Right. It wouldn't be addition. I don't think they would get better by salary dumping Julius Randle. The case for it is the player option, because if you pursue addition by subtraction and quote unquote dump him, then you remove the looming player option, and the player option is scary because the him opting into the player option has a direct corollary of can't bring back both Alexander Walker and Reed. You could still bring back one, shout out Rudy for cutting his salary. Like they'll be able to find Randle can opt in and you can bring back one of them. But if you want to bring back Reed and Alexander Walker, then you need Julius Randle to not opt into his player option from last season for next season. And the only way to ensure that happens is to have him not be on the team. Now that could come at the trade deadline,
right?
Where they have a lot of restrictions of who they can trade him for and how they can do that. It could also happen at the draft, in June when you'll have a little bit more clarity on what that Detroit pick is. Right. If you wanted to, attach that to Randle in some sort of trade, or just your books would be a little bit different. Maybe you just have some more clarity about maybe Nickeil or Nas just want to go, right. I don't think that necessarily, but It wouldn't be the first time we're like, oh, I thought this dude loved it here. And then they just left. So I think that's how I would think about the addition by subtraction I don't think it would be basketball addition by dumping him for the rest of the season. I do think it would be long-term addition by subtraction, given the kind of economics of the Wolves salary cap and proximity to the second apron.
And one of the things that has been fascinating to me about the Finch Conley bond, which has been inviolate, those guys have had each other's backs in some interesting situations, given how short the time period they've been together. It's been a lot of turbulence, and Conley's made some big moves that have had to be dealt with. On the other hand, he's also, the Conley Finau minus D'Lo trade, any feelings you have about the Randle trade, that one is like, and the Dillingham draft, and there are a lot of ways where a proactive general manager, Pobo, and a versatile coach, although some would argue that's a joke, from what we've seen out of Finch this year thus far, they are scrambling to tweak in some pretty significant ways while extending timelines for Rudy and Mike and getting into the prime of the other three guys, Nas, Jaden, and Ant. And it's a fascinating exercise. Julius Randle has always been a boulder there in that path. And it wasn't rocket science. When I analyzed this trade in September, to me, and I don't think I'm smarter than anybody else, it was so obvious that the fit of Randle in a half-court system with the personnel that existed there was going to be a problem. My mistake was assuming that Finch would fix it, and also that there would be a smoother. I actually thought that Nas would start and Randle would be maximized coming off the bench. And I don't know the reasons for it. I assume that, they have to do with the fact that you're a proud 10-year veteran and coming off the bench in a contract year is not ideal. And maybe even discussions were made about that before the trade happened. I don't know. But what I do know is there are no villains here. Tim Conley made the trade for understandable reasons. Chris Finch is coaching the way he's coaching for understandable reasons. Julius Randle is playing to the best of his ability in a bad fit situation to the best of his ability. Now, are there natural things that all those three principles have that are more obvious their flaws and how they operate because of the situation? Yes, but it's not that I don't think Julius Randle is lying down and being a dog. There are times when he's always been hit and miss on defense. That is something that's happened throughout his career. So you could say the same about Ant, for that matter. So they are what they are. The situation is what it is. The people who cherish Cat and were defenders of Cat when a lot of people, and I ripped them and praised them, I would imagine pretty 50-50. I mean, because it was
maybe 60-40.
Which way? Rip?
Yeah.
Okay, that could be. I mean, I'll take that. Because you can only do what you can react to.
Yeah. No.
The people who defended him through thick and thin have a right to say, see, we told you so, because it's been more damaging than I anticipated, I think, than what Conley and Finch anticipated. And it may still be worth it. This is the time, this is like 2 years ago when people were debating Gobert. This is what you're doing now. You're in the period where it's going to look bad. Right. There may be a period when it looks very good indeed, and that's certainly what Conley and Finch are counting on.
Right.
But it's a bad situation because it's a bad fit, but it is an understandable consequence of the way things, I think, needed to unfold.
So for kind of like the first time, I took some time over the weekend to just look and consider, Randle trades. And the way that, as is, I think, is just true to start thinking about any sort of trade when you're trading someone from quote unquote your team, to the other team, is to someone else's team, is to think about what the motivation is for that team receiving the player. Right. And where I'm at with Julius Randle is I think Julius Randle could be a fit and productive fit on certain teams. I think that team, or the Wolves, whatever the team is, needs to be designed in a way that Julius Randle is a good fit. You have to, the way your roster is constructed around that needs to be in a specific sort of manner that allows him to play in a way that enables his strengths and, diminishes the things that are his weaknesses. And I say that to mean, I think a team could find that this summer and be like, this would actually make sense. We lost this player coming in this way. We need more score, whatever it might be. And they really design out their roster for him in July, whatever. It's very hard for me to find a team right now where I go, that would be a good fit for that team in February and the rest of the season. So that has if that is true, that is a very strong limiting factor on what you can or cannot do to trade them. And that's even ignoring the
takes two to tango, right? You need two trade. You need trade partners who both think that the trade is a good trade.
Exactly. And so the partners right now that I think would think it is a good trade are a team like Washington or New Orleans, who I'm sure would be more than willing to bring him in if they were compromised. Not compromised. If they were compensated with a draft pick, like that Detroit draft pick, it's gonna be a first this year. Would Washington take in Julius Randle and a first in a salary? For sure. I mean, I guess I don't know that, but I would imagine they would be willing to do that. That's very much been Washington's behavior of, trying to build up and stock the coffers. They did it with Porzingis, Westbrook, whatever, I know that was a different team there, but it's the OKC way, right? Of, while we're bad, we're going to take in Al Horford and get a first round pick with him when we take him in. They just did that over and over again. And Washington is in the process of doing that. Maybe New Orleans will be in the process of doing that. I think they could get addition by subtraction, by subtracting him, to one of those teams. Right. It's just going to then come at the cost of, let's call it that Detroit first round pick, or maybe Rob Dillingham or something like that, right, going out with them. And then that's subtraction, the real subtraction, and the
Right.
addition needs to be very strong to justify that, which
Right.
is knowing that you're going to be able to re-sign Nikhil and Nas. And I think that
Right.
is the most, for me, the most like reasonable, realistic way to think about Julius Randle going into the trade deadline is he worth being salary dumped and having an asset attached to him, so as to be able to do that? And I think the Wolves' answer to that is going to be no. I don't think they're going to.
Well, and let's think about the optics of that. What you just said amounts to Cat for DiVincenzo.
Yeah, DiVincenzo,
because you're getting rid of the other. You're getting right. I know. And I totally get that the fact that a $50 million salary versus a $12 million salary, it is that difference is the salary flexibility piece that people, it tears their hair out to say you're tearing down a championship contender for a theoretical chance to build a championship contender. I mean, that sounds like nonsense to them. And I would argue that, first of all, there are no guarantees that the Wolves are going to win 56 games running it back the same way they did. In addition to the fact that you don't get to keep Nas if you have Cat on the team. It just is a flat out fact because the salaries would not allow it. It just, so do you like Nas? Do you think that Nas fits the Ant timeline better than Cat does? Do you think really that they would win a ring? Do you think it's going to be as puppies and rainbows as it was last year? All that is possible, but you
have to sign up a percentage to that, of that's what.
And again, and these are, that's why Tim Connolly makes the big bucks. He's the one that makes those decisions, and sometimes they're controversial. And also, kudos for Cat to make it look like such a bad trade. I mean, he is balling in New York, and
it's awesome. Yeah,
and you know what? Good for him. The guy has been through his share of the wars, and what I hope. Obviously, I like to cover the team I'm covering for as long as possible. So I want to see the Wolves advance as far as they can go. Cat's in the East. Let Cat, roll with that East team. Good luck. He's got Cleveland and Boston to contend with over there. But good luck. I'm really glad. When I wrote the piece about the trade, I just said I wish him satisfaction and peace of mind in a good situation, and that's what he has thus far. And so, at that side of the equation, it's a happy ending, and hats off to him.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting next 4 weeks, I think, until the trade deadline. And in that time, we're gonna get ownership news, and there's gonna be a whole, who is. It is literally the baton. If it is passed, is going to be like. Literally passed like right before or after the trade deadline. That's just some timing over there. So I would just like throw that factor into all of this to listeners as you see fit. Also a reason that I don't think Chris Finch is going to get fired, because who that in the next handful of weeks, because they're just not going.
Well, that was always ridiculous.
It was, but I think that is like I
know.
That's the bullet to that idea. Is they're just not going to do that.
The fire the coach people in any sport, in any situation, the best thing to do is to fire the coach. Forget recent history, forget, what you've seen. I think the people that follow this team the closest are the people who have the more realistic view about, and believe me, I think Finch's stubbornness with the starting lineup, and I think his proclivity not to call timeouts, and his ticks. He has ticks. I'm not saying the guy's perfect by any means, but I think if you look at the iterations of what Chris Finch has coached, if you look at the roster, he inherited that grim day in March or whatever it was when he was plucked off the bench from Toronto, and Dame
Let's stay
Lillard
here,
was
yeah.
hollering about racism and Vanderpool, and all of a sudden, what happened cascading from there? The Pat Bev Vando team, the first Rudy team, the
Trading
Conley.
D'Lo.
Yeah. I mean, and it has not been. This isn't a Steve Kerr gig. And so I just think that I've got some issues with Finch thus far this season, and you admit your biases out loud. I am biased toward the fact that he's the best coach this franchise has ever had, and I've seen them all. So I
was like, you could just
fight me
out loud. Well, but we'll circle back in a week, and that's just kind of how this team feels right now. This is a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Right now, with kind of
if they had lost that game last night, imagine what the tenor of our conversation.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If Ant doesn't pull up for 2 monster threes, or Dante doesn't shut down Harden, or
that tip at
that
the
Nas foul, tip in overtime, and I mean, it would just be that is the thin line,
Right.
and that is something where the skeptics of this team and the people who say I'm out, screw this or whatever. Last season was a joy. They stopped teams, and if they didn't stop a team, you knew they'd stop them sooner or later. I mean, there was no 3-game losing streaks. There have been 4 of them thus far this year.
Yeah.
So I am not saying that if you expected a repeat of the beautiful season last season, that you don't have a right to be disgruntled. But a lot of season left, and a thin margin for error. And in some respects, the thin margin for error is, where we have our fun, picking apart things, because it is the thin margin for error. So we get to talk about, if this or this,
Mm-hmm. This is obviously to listen to a little bit longer of an episode, but again, we're not gonna. No. I mean, you and I have been going longer on these. I actually think this works really well, and that maybe people aren't listening to this until until Wednesday morning after the Wolves are on a back-to-back.
They lose
7
that
hours.
The currency on this baby's going down.
Yeah, well, that's why they can listen to this podcast tomorrow morning, and then if they lose to the Pelicans, then Chris will be here to tell us all about the locker room in New Orleans after
There you
that.
go.
When are you writing tomorrow morning?
Yeah, I'll write tomorrow, and it'll be out Thursday, I think.
Okay, so normally, Britt's later in the week, and we can talk about his weekly column, but you can look for that up at minpost.com. He always tweets those out. On Twitter at Britt Robson, and over at Blue Sky, I would imagine as well. So be looking for that. Britt will be writing off of, you'll get his extended thoughts. You got his thoughts off of the Clippers, these last few games here. And we'll see if they can kind of extend the good vibe tonight in New Orleans with this new starting 5. And it's a new thing for us to begin tracking. This team has been playing the same way and the same groups for a long time. They're not doing that anymore. And that in and of itself allows for the possibility of, this next chapter of the season being something a little bit different. So we will, we'll be here to talk about whatever that is. Again, you can follow Britt on Twitter at Britt Robson. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Until I think it'll probably come out Wednesday evening. Until Wednesday with Chris, he's Britt, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.